So one of those things I've always been so scared of, but is just so useful, is Docker or containers, and specifically the implementation with Docker. So I'll show in a second as a little demo. I got this ML project. I built this REST API, and we're going to serve it inside of a Docker container. We're going to build a Docker image so we can deploy it in a whole bunch of places. It'll be super sweet. Before that, it's like, let's start. What is the most basic, or what is a really simple kind of Docker example? Why might you use this? How could this help you today? Let me tell you from my perspective. Here's a really simple one for me. This is a 2-line. First of all, everything in Docker, we're going to start with a Docker file. A Docker file is going to give us essentially, we could think of this as like, this is a manifest, it's a recipe, it's going to build something. What are we going to build? We're going to build an image. And an image is like a really lightweight virtual environment. It's basically, we're taking this concept of either coming from a Python virtual environment and extending it to give us like an operating system, or taking a virtual machine and saying, instead of fixing the amount of RAM and storage and stuff, just give us something that's really ephemeral, but has the operating system characteristics. That sounds really like kind of weird. What do I mean? Let's just show an example. So here's a Docker file that has 2 lines. It's a text file called Docker file. I'm saying from CentOS 7. CentOS is an operating system with a specific version, and I have an entry point bin bash. So we can build this Docker image from this file with a command like this, and once done, we can actually run this thing. So let me just find let me reverse search here. With the microphone, I'm always typing stuff. Here we go. So let's run this image. Let's run this image as a container. And what I'm doing at this point is I'm running Docker. I went to Docker Hub. I downloaded a CentOS 7, essentially operating system. It's running on my local machine. It doesn't have any allocated memory or physical storage like a VM would. But now, check it out. Like, who am I? I'm root. Where am I? Like, I'm inside of a CentOS 7 machine. I can do Linuxy things. I can do, pick whatever operating system I want. But I now have like a little development environment. I can play around. I don't have to change anything. I don't need VMware. I don't need ESXi. I don't need any of this other stuff. I can have a 2-line Docker file, grab an operating system that I want, and I can start playing around and testing stuff. So what might we do? What would be an example? Well, let me jump over and show you a little project I've got going, right? So I've got this ML example, and in my ML example, I built a REST API. We'll get into REST APIs another time, but I'm using a tool called fastapi, which is super sweet. It comes with a bunch of things. And if I want to package this up in a way that's easy to ship to other places, thinking like US Postal Service, if it fits, it ships. Like a container is a really good idea. We put something in the container, we can send it around. Not explosives, not things, but I mean, you get some terms and conditions, but for the most part, it's like if it fits, it ships, just put it in the box. That's what the container will do. And so I'm running a container right now, and it's a little messy, but I'm running this container on my local machine, and so I can come over to my web browser, and you can see my little REST API running. If we want to jump in and actually try this out, this is all just from fastapi. Docker's not doing anything here other than serving the application, but it makes this so easy. I know if I run this inside of Docker on my MacBook here, I can send it over to another server, and it should work, fingers crossed, but it's much more likely to work than if I'm just sending regular source code. Anyway, we jumped to a lot of things. Let's just go back real quick recap. Docker, this really interesting kind of virtualization layer. It's either giving us more than what would be a Python virtual environment, or it's making a much thinner version of a VM. This is really helpful both for playing around locally. You can just run different operating systems, try stuff on your local machine without having to download VMs or spin up cloud resources. But it's also a great way to deploy stuff, because anything we put in these containers, for the most part, if it fits, it ships. So REST APIs, whatever our model training code is, we can now take advantage of these cloud services by saying, hey, here's this container, just go run this thing. So much more that comes from this. If you're not playing around with Docker, let me go back to Docker. If you're not playing around with Docker, you really should. Hope you found this useful.